What's up guys, Asian here again with another Trials Guide video, and today we're going to be going over our red CP and our green CP for the various trials. So this is an update to the old red CP distributions for the various trials. So I am adding in, I believe Cloud Rest was not on our previous video, so now I added in Cloud Rest. We have 30 more CP, the CP cap was raised, so we gotta take that in consideration. And I'm also adding in green CPs because there's been kind of a discussion as to kind of how to best optimize your green CPs, because some trials require some more breaking free, some more blocking, some more cost reduction. So we'll talk about green CPs as well, kind of how you want to optimize it depending on your specific role. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're on ESO. We're going to start off on ESO, and then we're going to transition over to a picture of the red CPs distributions for each of the trials and explain kind of what's going on there. But first, let's talk about our green CPs since we're still in game. So our green CPs for DPS, right now you kind of split 75-75 or Canon's Tenacity usually. There's some discussion as to whether it's even worth putting 75 points into Tenacity, because not a lot of people are actually heavy attacking to restore their Magicka or Stamina anymore. They're actually either using an ability, so like Stamsork for instance, using Dark Deal and things like that. And then Magic DPS are running things like Spell Sim in order to get their resources back. So there is a little bit of a discussion whether or not Tenacity is actually worth it or not. I still think it is, but some other people think it's not. It really is going to depend on whether you have your attack resources or not during trials. So if you are going 75-75 like I am here, that leaves 110 points right now. The cap is 780, which gives us 260 points. So normally for my build videos, I normally go evenly split as much best I can across the three what I consider to be the most important PvE nodes outside of Tenacity and Arcanist. Those are Shadow Ward, Tumbling, and Warlord. So you can see I have my 30, 40, 40. However, there are some trials where you might not necessarily get a lot of use out of something like Shadow Ward or Tumbling because you're not really using dodge roll or blocking or breaking free as much. So there is that kind of discussion there, and that is a kind of a legitimate kind of thing you want to take into consideration when you're kind of considering what is going to be the best distribution, basically. So out of all the different nodes that you have here, there's only a handful that you're going to want to take into consideration. So Tumbling for roll dodge cost, Shadow Ward for block cost. You can have Healthy for health regen, but that's not really going to be a node that you're going to invest in. Warlord for break free cost, and then Sprinter is one thing that you might want to consider reducing cost of sprint, but it's not really going to be used so much as DPS. So right now there are 7 trials in the game. The 3 Kraglorn trials, AA, SO, HRC. You have the 2 full DLC trials, so you have vMaw and vHoF, and then you have the 2 mini trials, so you have Asylum and Cloud Rest. So for each of them, they kind of have different requirements. So for the Kraglorn trials, you can pretty much go with this distribution that I have here: 30 Warlord, 40 Tumbling, 40 Shadow Ward, and that's just because the Kraglorn trials, there's not that much breaking free you have to do, there's not much roll dodging you have to do, there's not, you know, the most you'll be doing is probably blocking, and in those instances, you know, you can invest a little bit more in the Shadow Ward if you'd like. So it's kind of up to you if you want to go with this 40-40-30 split, or if you want to put a little bit more into Shadow Ward as a result. You really won't be dodge rolling, you really won't be using break free too much in any of these. More often than not, you'll be block casting more often. So for the 3 Kraglorn trials, there's really anything you want for the green CPs. Now let's talk about vMaw. So vMaw is a trial that you will actually be dodge rolling a fair amount. So instance where you might be dodge rolling would be for the get out of the the Sun Eater's negates. If one of the tank dies with the two-hander and you have a two-hander on you, you're going to have to dodge roll the heavy attacks and the smashes, obviously. So you might want to invest a little bit more into dodge rolling instead. So that would be Tumbling. So you might want to take some points out of like Shadow Ward, put them into Tumbling. You won't really be blocking very often. You know, Twins, you're not going to be blocking. Let's see, Zaj, you might be blocking if you have a pillar on you, but that's only really one fight. For Adpulse, you're not really going to be blocking too much. And then for Rakat, again, you're not really blocking all that often. So Tumbling is going to be a little bit more useful in vMaw because you are going to be dodge rolling a little bit more often. If you are a runner, you might also want to take in consideration putting some points into sprinter, because in the back room, obviously you kind of want to sprint from one place to the next, and even though the Eyes of Jode does give you major expedition, you can still sprint on top of that, so that adds another 40% run speed. So it might be worth putting some points into sprinter if you are a backroom runner for vMaw. So that's something you want to take in consideration. So the two most important ones for vMaw are going to be sprinter and tumbling. Now let's go ahead and talk about vHoF. vHoF, you're going to be doing a lot of breaking free, regardless if you're stamina or magicka. That's mainly because of the capacitors with their conduit strikes. Those will stun you. And then there are other sort of kind of CCs that you will have to use break free out of. The grabby hands, the what we call bad touches in the refab committee, as well as the as assembly general. So you'll be using breaking free a little bit more often in vHoF compared to other trials. So in that instance, you're going to want to use Warlord, which reduces the cost of break free. So Warlord is going to be more important in vHoF there. Block cost is also another very important one in vHoF because you can't block the conduit strikes. So that's something you want to take into consideration too. You won't really be doing too much dodge rolling. You'll mostly be blocking or breaking free. So I would invest more into Shadow Ward and Warlord if you're doing vHoF. Now for Asylum, you're going to be doing a lot of blocking. So for Lotus, you'll be blocking that. For Felms, you're not going to be really blocking it too much because it's a bleed, so you can't obviously mitigate that through block. And then in Ohms, you're going to be blocking the fire during execute. So you might want to put a little bit more points into Shadow Ward. But it's not really all that important because again, we're only really using it for Lotus, the Defiling Blast, as well as you might want to try to mitigate some of the corroding bolt, the oppressive bolts. So that's probably a little bit more important than the rest, but not terribly important. You won't really be dodge rolling too much, and you won't really be using break free too much in Asylum. So Asylum is very similar to Craglorns in that you can really go wherever you really want there. You can put a little bit more emphasis in the Shadow Ward if you'd like, but it's really not going to be helping you too much there. And finally, for Cloud Rest. Cloud Rest, very similar to Craglorns, very similar to Asylum. You're not really going to be using too much breaking free or dodge rolling too much. The exception is if you are going to be going downstairs, the Shadow Realm basically. In that instance, it might be beneficial to put a couple of points into Sprinter because you will be running around a lot, especially in hard mode in +2 and +1, where downstairs you will only get a limited number of those Vulcanar lights to synergize with. So you might be running around a little bit more often there. Obviously, if you're a Magblade, you have Refreshing Path going, so you get major expedition that way. But again, you can always sprint. That gives you a little bit more run speed. So if you put some points in a Sprinter, that'll reduce the cost of sprint there. So for Cloud Rest, Sprinter, if you're going to go downstairs, otherwise you can kind of do whatever you'd like there. So all of these nodes, by the way, are affected by jump points. So if I only put 1 point into Sprinter, I basically don't do anything. I have to get up to the next whole number, so I have to get up to 1%. So just keep that in mind when you're putting kind of points into these various nodes here. So just to kind of really quickly summarize, the Craglorns and Asylum, you can really put wherever you'd like. vMaw, you're going to want to put a little bit more points into dodge rolling, so that's going to be tumbling. And if you're a backroom runner, you want to do Sprinter. And then for Halls, you want to put some more points into Warlord as well as Shadow Ward. And then for Cloud Rest, you want to put more points into Sprinter if you are going to go into the Shadow Realm. So that's all of our green CP points. Obviously, our blue CP points are all covered in our specific build videos, so we will go over that. Now let's go ahead and talk about our red CPs. So red CPs are going to be our damage mitigation CPs. So I just want to go over them real quick, just so you guys know what's going on here. So Ironclad reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks. So direct damage attacks are generally going to be any attack that deals all of its damage in one hit. That's going to be very, very common in a lot of trials where most of your damage is going to be coming from direct damage sources. That doesn't mean that dots or anything like that, those damage over time sources, are any less damaging. It's just obviously direct damage hits for a lot more damage than the damage over time component. So the damage over time component might deal the same amount of damage over the duration of the debuff, but obviously it's not going to kill you in one blow like a direct damage hit will. So Ironclad's going to be pretty important there. Spell Shield is another node that you might see used fairly often because of the increase to spell damage, spell resistance I should say, which decreases the amount of spell damage you're taking. most of the damage that you'll be taking as a DPS and a healer is going to be spell damage. So magic, flame, shock, or frost. There are very few instances where you're going to be taking majority physical damage. There's only really one trial in the game where that happens. So spell shield is going to be very, very important there. Resistance obviously isn't going to be helpful because there is no crits in PvE. Medium armor focus, light armor focus, and heavy armor focus. You don't obviously aren't going to use heavy armor focus unless you're a tank, and even then you're not really going to be using it. So it's really going to be light armor focus and medium armor focus. And like I kind of alluded to when I talked about spell shield, because you're not really taking that much physical damage, you're not really going to put any points into those armor focus nodes. Thick skin is basically the exact same thing as Ironclad, just for damage over time. And then Hardy reduces from physical, poison, and disease damage, pretty much any sort of physical damage. Elemental Defender, on the other hand, protects you from spell damage, so magic, flame, frost, and shock. You can think of it as this way. Hardy will basically reduce any damage that is also mitigated by physical resistance. Elemental Defender will mitigate any damage that is also mitigated by spell resistance. So you can think of it that way. So these two nodes are also going to be fairly important because they reduce across all the physical and all the spell resistance. Now, of course, the distributions are going to vary depending on the specific damage that you're going to be incoming. So more often than not, you'll have a little bit more into Ele Defender than Hardy. But there are some trials where you're going to have even distributions here. Now, there's two other nodes that you're going to want to take into consideration here. And that's going to be Bastion and Quick Recovery. The reason why you want to take these into consideration is for Field Physician, which reduces the damage you take by 15% while you're resurrecting another player. So this is a very nice passive to have, especially for progression style guilds, because this way you have some damage mitigation while you're resurrecting another player. So I'd like to have this here. If you are going for score, some guilds will not even run any points here because, dying basically means you reset the trial for another go. So the guilds like Mechanical Challenge, Accidental Aggro, What Mechanics, Mundus, they'll sometimes do that. Because they're pushing for the highest score possible, and vitality is very important. So if anybody dies, they just reset the instant instead. But for us not as good players, we do have to invest some points to get Field Physicians. That's where Bastion and Quick Recovery comes in. Bastion's obviously going to be more useful for Magicka because you have damage shields. Quick Recovery is going to be useful for both Magicka and Stamina. Both of these are affected by jump points, so 10 points here you can see we only get the 4%, not the 5%. Now, moving on over to our actual red CPs now. So this is our red CPs. I'm gonna just blow it up real quick so you guys can see it a little bit better. Hopefully it doesn't get too pixelated there. There we go. I'm gonna just need to reduce it by 1 here so you can actually see it. Okay. So these are our red CP setups. This is updated for Wolfhunter, so 780, 260 CPs in most of these. So in this first column here, we have Ethereal Archive, Maw of Lurkage, and Cloud Rest. So all of these kind of fall in the same category because all of these primarily deal spell damage to DPS and healers. One thing I do want to point out is that this particular red CP distributions are for DPS and healers, with the exception being Asylum because kiting healers do have a little bit of different CP setups there if you are using fighting +1 with Felms or you're doing hard mode. So I will go over red CP's distributions for that. We'll go back to ESO and I'll show you guys what that CP is going to look like because you will have to deal with the Felms bleed. So AA, Maw, and Cloud Rest for DPS and healers is going to look like this. You have 64 into Elemental Defender, 61 Thick Skin, 72 Ironclad, 42 Spell Shields. And again, that's because you want to mitigate as much spell damage as possible because all the damage, or I should say 95 to 90%, 90 to 100% of the damage you take is spell damage. So that's why we have that distribution there. There's not a lot of physical damage that comes in unless for some reason the tank loses taunt or something like that. And then you can see here we also spend leftover points in the Quick Recovery and Bastion. So with this particular distribution here, I believe we are sitting at 250 points that's distributed. Let's see. No, we're sitting at this is 120. This is 12 plus 11. 12 plus 11 is 23. Plus 9, so we're at 239, I think. No. 12 plus 11 is... Okay. This might not actually be the correct one, so let me double check real quick that I have it Do have it here somewhere. Okay, so it is updated here, and I did have us recreate it here, so I'll just open up the original. So that one's actually a little bit outdated. So this is the actual one. So we have 75 Elemental Defender, 61 Thick Skin, 72 Ironclad, 41 Spell Shield. And this will bring us up to 249. So that gives us 11 points, which you can put into Bastion or Quick Recovery. So again, this is just AA, Maw, and Cloud Rest. Next one down here is going to be vHoF and HRC. This is going to be a little bit more split in terms of the damage you take. So you will be taking some physical and you will be taking some magical damage. So that's why we have this even split here: 64 Hardy, 64 Elemental Defender, 61 Thick Skin, 61 Ironclad. So you could also go 56 Thick Skin and 66 Ironclad, but I prefer to go 61-61. And this will bring you up to 250. So then you can put the 10 points into Bastion and Quick Recovery there in order to get that additional passive there that we talked about. So vHoF, HRC, again, because you're taking varied sources of damage. So halls, for instance, you are going to be taking damage from the spheres, which is magical and physical, and some of the bosses also deal magical and physical damage. So that's kind of why we have that there. For SO, this should be reversed, so it should be 64 Hardy, 49 Elemental Defender, 66 Thick Skinned Ironclad, and then that leaves us with, I believe, 4 Quick Recovery, 11 Bastion. So that actually covers all of your points there, I believe. So SO, actually you get more physical damage and magical damage. This is the only trial in the game right now where that's kind of centered around that, where DPS and healers take more physical damage, and that's from the poison from the trolls. So you do have a lot of points into Hardy in order to kind of mitigate the poison from the trolls. You still need some points into Ele Defender though, because bosses like Ozara, you have the overchargers, those still deal shock damage. So you do want to mitigate that, but SO is unique in that it has more physical damage than magical damage incoming to the DPS and healers. For VAS, this is mostly for the DPS. The healers, if you're doing +1 with Felms or hard mode, you will have a different CP distribution, and I'll go over that in a few minutes here. So Asylum is very centered around Ele Defender and Ironclad, because you don't have any dots that are bleeding put on you besides from Felms, and even the dot that you put on from Felms is not that bad. As a DPS, you shouldn't really be getting hit by the bleed too much, and if you are, you can shield through it. It's actually not that bad as long as you're not, standing in it and letting it stack up. So 75 Elemental Defender, 81 Ironclad, 53 Spell Shield. And all of this is to help defend us from Storm to Heavens, as well as the fire during Execute, so Trial by Fire. Gust of Steam, which is the jumps that he does physical damage, but it only happens 4 times in a trial, so obviously you're not really going to build CP around that at all. So Asylum is kind of also unique in that it's pretty much all magical damage that you need to mitigate there. And then we do have 23 points Quick Recovery, 28 points in the Bastion, and that does give us all 260 points here. And so this, for Asylum, because most people are running strictly magic DPS there, Bastion is going to be very important, and Quick Recovery just to help our healing out a little bit. You could put all these points into Bastion if you would like, kind of up to you. If you put 23 into Bastion, I believe you hit 51, which I don't believe is a jump point, but I could be mistaken on that. Let's go ahead back to ESO real quick so I can show you guys. So for red CPs for healers, if you're doing +1 with Felms, or if you're doing hard mode, you will have different red CPs because you do have to deal with the bleed, and you will have to deal with exhaustive charges if you're the kiting healer, which is considered direct damage as well. So if you are a kiting healer, you will need a few points into Hardy here, because the actually no, I don't think you need any points into Hardy actually. So you will still have 75 into Ele Defender. I would still recommend putting a couple of points into Bastion, something like 31 points or something like that. And you will need some points in the Thick Skinned, although not quite as much as I have here. So you'll probably be doing something like 40 in the Thick Skinned. You'll also need a lot of points into Ironclad here, so 81, and then you can put the rest of the points into Spell Shield here. Now you do have some points in the Bastion here. Shields are still very, very important as a healer if you're kiting hard mode or +1 with Felms. A lot of healers will preempt the Felms jump by using their shield, so that way the shield will eat some of that bleed for them. And then of course, you're not taking any physical damage, so you don't need any points into Hardy. And then thick skin is going to help protect you from that bleed there. Because you're going to be the one targeted by that bleed, you're probably going to get 2 or 3 stacks depending on how quick you are to get out of it. So you do want a couple of points in the thick skin there, and you still have 81 to hardy, Ironclad I should say, to help defend yourself from the Storm to Heavens as well as the exhaustive charges. That does deal direct damage. And 33 spell shield for the additional spell resistance, again to help deal with everything trial by fire, storm the heavens, all that stuff is just to protect you. So for healers, for hard mode AS as well as +1 with Felms, 81 Ironclad, 33 spell shield, 40 thick skin, 75 Ele Defender, 31 Bastion. That's my personal recommendation. Other healers have other recommendations as well, so you can kind of go with whatever fits you specifically. So that is pretty much it for this video. If you guys have any questions at all about red CPs, what moves from certain bosses are affected by which passives, things like that, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. Hopefully you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.